Thank you all for being here at our Clickworthy Websites webinar. We are going to talk through what it takes to build an effective website. Jacob and I have teamed up to present this webinar with the goal of having something that is actionable, that is practical, that you can use right away. These are things that we have learned working with dozens and dozens of clients on their websites. If you don't know me, my name is Amy Kendall. My company is Hello Story. We are a messaging and copywriting agency. So we write a lot of websites along with other marketing and sales materials. And then I have had the pleasure of working with Website Squirrel on a number of website projects, and they are just fantastic. So I said, let's do this webinar together to give people some practical information that they can use. Jacob is going to introduce himself and then take us through an agenda. But before we do that, I almost forgot. Before we do that, please make use of the chat today. Jacob and I both have our team members who are helping us keep an eye on it. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to drop them in chat, and then we will get to those at the Q&A at the end. If you want to drop your name, your business, where you're calling in from today in the chat, that would be great. And again, use that as a resource as we're going through to put your questions in there. So Jacob, I will let you introduce yourself and tell us what we're going to talk about.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Amy. And we're excited to be here today. Hopefully we can talk through some different tips and tricks for web development and copy and everything. And if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, because we want to be focusing on the things that matter to you and the questions that you came here for. So anyways, I'm Jacob Harmon from Website Squirrel. We do web development and design, custom websites, and excited to get started here. So the agenda for today, we're first going to be talking about the website development process and, in our opinion, the ideal website development process, which includes planning and strategy, messaging and content, design and development. And then we are going to review 2 websites live on the call. So we're going to take a look at them, give some feedback, constructive feedback, things that they're doing great, things that they could maybe improve on. And then we will have a Q&A. So first, to just get started, I just want to mention that websites are complex. It's a very complex machine. You're working with a lot of different people. There might be a designer, a developer, the stakeholders at the company, the customers that are looking at the website. There's just a lot of people involved. You're dealing with different layouts and structures and content and copy. Obviously, the design to make it look good. Frameworks and different tools and hosting platforms and infrastructure. And then, of course, optimizing that site to actually meet your goals and to get more sales. It's just a complicated beast. There's a lot of things when it comes to web development. And if you're not careful, you can start to feel like this AI generated fella right here, and just not feel very good. I was looking for a picture myself and I couldn't find a good one, so I went to the good old Chat GTP. You can see he's wearing 2 watches. But it can get frustrating dealing with all these different complexities. So hopefully we're going to be able to help with some of that today. Obviously, there's so much to go into that we can't cover it all. But we're going to focus on some tips and tricks. And really the goal is to have actionable insights that you can take and implement on your own website to improve it. So we're going to be talking through a tried and true process that we use with our clients to make sure that their websites are actually performing for them. And to get us started, let's talk about the planning and strategy. The most important thing that I can talk about here is please, please, please do not skip this step. Too many people want to jump straight over to design. We find with our clients that that's often where they come in. They say, oh, we just want a pretty website. And so they want to skip all this planning. And if you do that, believe me, you're probably going to have to come back again. If you jump straight to design, you're going to reach a point where your website isn't quite doing what you want it to do, and you're going to have to start over or spend a lot of money or spin your wheels to get it where it needs to be. So do not skip this step. So a couple of quick tips for you on the planning and strategy side of things. Make sure that you define the goal of your website. Every website's going to be a little bit different. Some websites, your goal might be actual sales, and it's an e-commerce website where you need to get people to a cart and to check out. Other websites are a lead gen tool, and you want somebody to submit their email so that you can get them on a list. And in other cases, a website's just a branding exercise, and you're building something that's pretty that you just want to evoke emotion, right? So define what is the goal for our website and what makes it a success versus not a success. If in 6 months we come back and look at the website and say, hey, it's doing this, and that's incredible, right? And that's what we want it to do. So you got to define that first. Second, based on that goal, create a sitemap and a user journey. So you're going to map out what pages you need on that website and what is the desired user journey from when somebody first lands on your site to where they actually accomplish the goal that you've already defined, right? So if it's an e-commerce website, how do they get from the homepage of the site to actually checking out and putting in their credit card information in the cart? If it's a lead gen website, how do they get to your website and actually end up getting you an email address or booking a sales call, right? So you got to think through that user journey and put yourself in their shoes. And then the third tip that I would give you here is once you have that user journey, you want to create wireframes for each page that you have in your sitemap. You need to go through and think, okay, how do we want the content structured on this site? What types of sections do we want to use? And I know that Amy's going to cover that a little bit more in the messaging piece. So I won't hit that part too hard, but I just want to reiterate how important it is to plan and to actually have a goal for the website before you get started. Real quick, wanted to mention a tool that we use at Website Squirrel and we love. It's called Rayloom. Feel free to go check them out. It is a sitemap and wireframe tool, and it's AI assisted. So you can basically explain what type of website you're wanting to build, and it will build a recommended sitemap. And then obviously you can change it and adjust it. I would not recommend keeping what the AI gives you, but you can then adjust that sitemap, and then it will also help you with the wireframe side of things. You can choose what types of sections you want and swap them out for different sections. It's a really cool tool. We use it here at Website Squirrel, and it's been really helpful in the planning stage of website building. So the next step is going to be content and messaging, and for that I'm going to turn it over to Amy since that is her subject matter expertise. And take it away, Amy.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we will dive into this. So Jacob talked about how you can't skip the planning and the strategy phase. I 100% completely agree with that. And I've also seen clients a lot of times try to skip to that design phase. Design is fun. It has colors and images, and you get to see your logo on the big website screen. But you're really going to shortchange yourself, not only in the planning and strategy, but also in the messaging and content. This needs to be its own phase as well, because if you are just filling in the little bubbles next to your pretty pictures, there's a very good chance that you're going to miss out on adding the content that you need to have on that page. And this is critical because people buy products and services based on words that make them want to buy those products or services. We have been using language for thousands and thousands of years. That's how we communicate things. And while there may be some small cases where someone can just look at an image of something and want to buy it, most of the time we need words to go along with that, especially if you're doing any sort of service sale or you have a long sales cycle, anything where you need to build trust, you're gonna need to have very intentional messaging and copy to go with your beautiful images and your beautiful design to help people want to engage and actually move along in that sales cycle. So people buy based on words. We need to be super intentional with the copy that we create on our messaging or on our website. And to do this, you need to make sure that you're answering a few key questions. First, you want to consider who you're talking to. This is kind of marketing 101, right? Know your audience. But it makes a huge difference. You're gonna write content that's very different for like a group of seasoned accounting professionals versus college students who just want their next meal, right? Like those are very different audiences. You're going to write content that's very different. So make sure you understand who you're talking to. You also want to have a really good idea of what you need to communicate. This goes back to the goal that Jacob was talking about, right? Like, are you trying to get somebody Do you want them to schedule a demo? Do you want them on a sales call? Do you want them to come try out your gym? Do you want them to actually buy something, right? Like you need to know what it is you're trying to communicate. What do they need to know when they leave your website? So along with that, you're going to be answering questions like what problem are you solving? Why do they want this thing? Why is this, what pain is this causing in their life? You're also going to want to make sure you know what solution you're offering, how you're going to solve that for them. And then you want to very much know what do you want them to do? Back to my initial point of like, are they doing a demo? Are they on a sales call? What do you want them to do when they come to your website? My very favorite TV show is The Great British Bake Off. Like I watch it all the time. And one of the things that Paul Hollywood says when he comes and checks out the biscuits and the cakes and things is a lot of times they'll look beautiful and then he tries it and he's like, this flavor is really lacking. This is all style and no substance. And it's like a thing that they kind of like toss at each other, like, oh, I don't want the all style, no substance, right? You don't want your website to be that either. It can't just look good. It's got to have some substance there to drive your people along that buyer's journey so that they actually convert and become the lead or the sale that you need them to be. Okay, so that's the why we need messaging. Now, how? How are we going to get this content that we need on our website? My number one recommendation is to use a framework. I use the StoryBrand framework when I work with clients. You can learn all about this framework for yourself in the book Building a Story Brand. It really is, it's kind of a workbook. It walks you through the process of how do I figure out what is my message for my business, and it uses a framework that then you can use on your website. Marketing Made Simple is a great follow-on piece to that. He even has a whole chapter in Marketing Made Simple about how do I take my message that I've developed in building a story brand and apply it to a website. Here's the first section you have, and the next section you have, and the next section you have. So it walks you through that process and makes it really simple. If for some reason you don't like books, you don't want to study, you don't have time, whatever, you can also kind of reverse engineer this process. Go look at some websites of people that are doing things that are similar to you, or even maybe they're in your same industry, or maybe they're just doing something similar. Like, for example, if I was a consultant in finance, I could look at other finance websites. I could also look at other consultants' websites, right? Like maybe I know a consultant who's super great, their website I know is working for them, but they do operation stuff instead of finance stuff. Well, I could still look at their website and see what's working. I'm going to look at it and be like, okay, well, what is this section talking about? What is this section? Which of these pieces do I like and not like? Maybe they have one about who they talk to or who they don't talk to or the problem they solve, whatever. The reason this works is because you're going to start noticing very quickly that websites use the same types of content sections. And the reason they do this is because it's what works. It's what people are looking for. It's the information that people go to find on these websites. So I have every now and then I'll have a client who's like, well, I don't want a website like everyone else's. Well, we're not creating a website like everyone else's. We're just using the structure that your audience is going to expect when they come to your website. So once you've figured out your framework or reverse engineered and figured out the sections that you want to use, the next thing you want to do is use a wireframe. This is like what Jacob mentioned in the planning and strategy. Use a wireframe to help yourself stay organized as you start building out the content for your website. I just use Google Drawings when I do this. So I just recently redid my website. This is what the wireframe looked like versus what the website ended up looking like. You can see this wireframe is not pretty. Like it is not pretty at all. But it's really a word map. It shows me where the words go on my website. It's a great tool because it helps me gauge the length of the content to make sure that I'm not writing too much or too little. It makes it really easy for me to communicate with the designer who I handed this off to. You know, she had an idea of like what I was thinking and was then able to interpret it in different ways to make the design really pop. Let me circle back real quick to that length point. In the last month, have had, I think, 3 clients come to me and say, hey, I would love your help with my website. I have most of my website or my homepage copy written already. I'd like you to just kind of like look it over. And they basically wanted like a stamp of approval, right? So I pulled up these documents that they had, and they'd just been doing it in like a Word doc, which is totally fine. But they had like paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of content for single sections. And I had to break the news and be like, this is great background info, but this is not website content. Like this is all about your brand. This is really great branded content, but we need to actually write it for the website. A wireframe helps you do that because it gives you visual cues as to when you're getting to have too much content for single sections. People generally don't read websites, they scan websites. You can get away with some, paragraphs. Like you can see, I've got a couple sections here where I've got a decent amount of content, but it's not a full page in a Google Doc, right? So wireframe helps you kind of gauge that and just makes it a little bit easier um, to move things around before there's all of the design elements and all that kind of stuff. It gets more complicated the more you add to your site. And by doing a wireframe in this stage, it helps you get it done the right way so you don't have to redo it later. Okay, so now we've talked why and how. Let's get into kind of the what of, okay, how do I apply this as I start actually writing the words that are going to go on my website? The first thing that I would recommend is using the grunt test. So the grunt test is for the very top of your website. This is what pops up before you scroll down. There's been a lot said about how we all have like shrinking attention spans. I used to hear that we all have the attention span of a goldfish, and I think lately I've actually heard that goldfish have longer attention spans than we do. So we have like seconds to grab people's attention and get them to pay attention to our website. And so they need to know who you are, what you do, and why they should be paying attention. So I tell clients that your very top header, it needs to answer the questions of who you are, how you can help, and how someone can get your solution. So if we strategically kind of like put the pieces in place, we can accomplish this fairly easily. So we've got our logo up in that top left corner. That should answer the who you are question, right? Unless your name is like totally not attached to your industry or you don't have a tagline or whatever. Hopefully your name helps people understand who you are and maybe even a little bit about what you do. Then you can use your nav bar. Sometimes you can strategically use your navigation bar to highlight services or products that you offer. And then you're going to have a button in that top left or top right corner that says what you want them to do, your call to action button. When people come to websites, they generally look in a Z pattern. So they're going to step in that top left corner. They're going to go over to the top right. They're going to come down. So that's where you got your headline. And then you're going to have another button that highlights again what you want to do. So make sure that you're using that top part of your website very strategically to so that you can pass the grunt test, so that people are going to come and they know who you are, what you offer them, and how they can get it. My next thing is to make sure you have a clear call to action. We instinctively know that we don't like to take action on our own. We see this in movies, we see this in books. The hero often doesn't act until there's a bomb that's about to blow up, or maybe they meet someone and fall in love, but they forgot to get their contact info. So now it sets this whole story in motion, right? Like this is true in our stories because it's also true in life. Most people don't act unless they're challenged to take action. But unfortunately, 70% of the small businesses in America don't have a clear call to action button on their website. And because of that, they're losing money. We need to have something very specific that we want them to do. So it should not just be get started, because who knows what get started means? That could mean anything, right? We want it to be very clear and compelling and direct. So it should be buy now, schedule a call, let's talk, book your demo. Like make it really specific, get your offer, or just make it very, very specific. Give them something that they can accept or reject so that you can move them along in that phase. And there's no question about what they need to do in order to engage with you and work with you. And then finally, get yourself an outside set of eyes to look at your content before you move to that next phase. I was telling someone the other day, I'm kind of like a giant billboard stomp. It's like just fun for me. When we drive around, I love looking at billboards. I often critique billboards. I think my husband is really sick of me like finding a billboard I don't like and then talking about why it's stupid for like a really long time afterwards. So as an example of that, one of my favorites for all the wrong reasons was actually a couple of years ago, and I'm still talking about it. But it said 80% of families are glad they planned ahead. And at the time that I saw this billboard, I was in a phase of life where family planning had a very specific meaning for me of like who was and were we or were we not adding people to our family, right? And I was like, I really don't think that that's what this billboard is probably trying to communicate. So I was going through like what is it? What could it be? And I was like, well, it could be maybe it's vacation planning, right? Maybe it's financial planning, maybe it's grocery planning, like I don't know, right? So I had come up with all these different options, and I finally, after passing it like 20 million times, I finally looked it up, and it was funeral planning, like that's what it was. And I was like, oh, well, that's not at all what I thought, and that was a total waste of money because no what like I mean there were probably a few people who were in that stage of life who got it, but the rest of us didn't, and they probably didn't even realize that no one got it because they're in the weeds of their business. To them, in their that marketing team, their day-to-day conversations, pre-planning has a very specific meaning to them, but that's not what the rest of us are thinking. And we're all doing that same thing on our websites and in our marketing content and messaging. We are all using phrases that we think are super clear, but probably are not. So before you move into the, okay, now I'm ready to get this website designed and up, make sure that you have someone look at your content and give you that feedback who's not on your team, not like in the day to day, in the weeds with you, because it's going to just save you so much like having to redo stuff or wasted money or resources later on down the line. So, just to sum up, kind of like wrap all mine up with a nice little bow, make sure that you take the time to spend the time on messaging. Treat it like its own section of the project. It shouldn't be a second class citizen in this whole thing. And then use a framework, use a wireframe, make sure that your top is clear, pass the grunt test, have calls to action. And I don't just mean like one button in one place, like wherever your people are on your site, they should know what they're supposed to do. And then get someone else to look at it. And then once you've done those things, you will be all ready to just like, you'll have a nice package that you can just hand off to the design and the development team so that they can take you to that next phase. So Jacob, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. And I just want to throw in here real quick that I'm glad I'm not the only one that looks at billboards because I swear every time I'm driving down the road, my wife's like, "What are you looking at? Like, look at the road," because I'm constantly looking at all the billboards. I guess it's the a problem with being a marketer. You just are constantly looking at other people's marketing. So anyway, I'm glad it's not just me. Okay, let me share my screen here real quick. All right, can everyone see that? Perfect. Okay, so we're going to move on to design. And this is the fun part, right? We've alluded to this multiple times during the webinar so far, is that this is what everybody wants to jump into. So yay, we made it. We're in design. So I'm going to give a couple of thoughts and tips and things that you should think of as you're working through the design piece. And the first tip that I would give is learn the basics of design principles. There's a million courses out there, a million YouTube videos, so many free resources. Just spend a couple of hours learning about design and design principles, and you'll be amazed at how much better you become at design very, very quickly. The learning curve, I mean, obviously design isn't easy and it takes a long time to learn, but even just a little bit of effort there will make a lot of difference. Even if you are not designing your website, let's say you've hired another graphic designer to do it for you, I still recommend learning the basics of design principles because that's going to give you the language needed to communicate with that graphic designer and be able to give them feedback. So learn about color theory and how colors work together and the way the different colors affect the human emotions. Learn about balance and how you can make your sections and your website actually visually appealing, and contrast and hierarchy. There's all these design principles out there. I would just spend a little bit of time learning them. I think that it's something that's super important. The other thing is, and I know we've said this multiple times, but don't forget the plan you created back in step one, right? What's the goal for the website? If the goal is to get leads, then your design should all revolve around how do we get a person on our site to actually convert into a lead. If the goal of the website is to sell on e-commerce, then the entire purpose of your design should push everyone towards the products and then towards the checkout so that they can actually give you their credit card and give you money, right? If the purpose of the site is a branding exercise, then the entire design should revolve around that. So do not forget the planning work that you've already done. It should be integral to the whole process. And I'll just add here real quick, we're currently in the middle of a redesign process for our own website. And I will just say that I'm so excited because we followed this process. When we first built our website a couple years ago, I was like, well, I'm a web developer, I can do this. And I kind of just threw it up. And it's okay, it's not bad. But now we're spending the time needed to really plan, okay, what's the point of our website? What role does it play in our team? And how can we actually get it to work for us instead of just be something on the internet, right? And it's really exciting as the design is coming together. We just finished the design phase. It's fun to look at, and we can see the big difference that it makes. The last tip that I will give you on the design side of things is design for reuse. Think about reusable components and reusable sections and pieces of the website. Especially this is going to help you as you move on to the development side of the site. Websites are designed with building blocks. And so if you can make sure that you're thinking about that during the design phase, then you're going to save yourself a lot of work. And it also is just going to help it with consistency and making sure everything on the website is cohesive. I can't tell you how many times I look at a website and at first I'm like, man, this is really pretty. And then I scroll down a little bit and I'm like, oh, that section does not look like it belongs. I don't know why, but it's just the odd child out here. Like it doesn't look like it fits with the rest of the website. So the more you can design for reuse and creating a design system that's like, okay, here's how all of our headings are going to look, and here's how all of our images are going to look. They're all going to have rounded corners, or they're all not going to have rounded corners, or whatever. That's going to help you. And just to give you a little bit of a visual here, this is the Figma file of a website that we recently built, and you can see how we think about reusability in components. So we have, for example, a simple header component, and we have a couple different variations of it so that maybe on one page we have a darker version and on another page we have the cream version. Here's what a normal section looks like if the image is on the left and the content's on the right. And here's what it looks like if the content's on the left and the image is on the right. We have a section that doesn't have an image, and just kind of thinking through, okay, here's the different building blocks of our website, and we can now combine those and move those around as desired. And I would also refer back to your wireframe, right? So if you look at your wireframe and you say, okay, I'm using 3 columns a lot in this wireframe, like almost on every page of the website, then you probably should design a component, right? That's like, okay, this is what our 3-column layouts look like. And then you can plug in the copy for each individual page. And that's going to just help your website become more cohesive and look good on all the different pages and all the different sections. All right. And because I'm a techie and I just love to throw in the tools that we use, Figma is the app that we use for design. Obviously, there's a million different apps out there, but we really like Figma because it helps with that whole design system piece and components piece. They have a whole system set up for that. So that's the tool that we use in our agency. All right, moving on to development and optimization. And this is my baby. I'm a developer at heart. Our agency does design and development, but this is my favorite part. And I'll try to be careful here about not getting too technical. If I do, please call me out in the chat and say, hey, could you define that word for me? Because it's hard to tell how technical of an audience we have here. But the thing that I would talk about when it comes to development is focus on the small stuff. Sweat the small stuff. You want to make sure that you're building your website on a sound foundation. A website is actually a lot like a physical building, right? Where you could build a building with a not very great foundation and terrible framing work, and then you can plaster a bunch of paint on it and kind of make it look okay. But really that underlying structure is still abysmal, right? But if you're going to build it right, then you're going to build a solid foundation, and your frames are going to be all straight and level, and you're going to do standard things like having the right amount of space between each post and everything like that. So I would recommend when you're building your website, think about the technical underlying structure. Make sure that you're building it correctly so that you're not bloating it. You're not adding a bunch of really large image files. You're making sure that your class naming is good. Classes, for those of you that don't know, in CSS, you can create a class which defines the style of a particular element, and you want to reuse as many classes as possible because that way your code on the back end is not as large. And so there's a lot of things there that I would recommend. Just make sure that you're building it in a good way and you're thinking through the structure so that as it grows, it's scalable for your business. Okay, the next thing that I would recommend on this piece is focus on the end user. So go back to your target audience. Who is it that you're hoping will be using this website? And what will their experience be like when they're using it? So for example, if you have a really cool animation on your buttons when you hover over them, that's great. Maybe it looks amazing. But if that animation takes 5 seconds and they're unable to click on the button while that animation is going, that's not a great user experience, right? Because then they're sitting there and trying to navigate your site, and your site is actually getting in their way. So I would just think through, especially when you're doing your quality assurance and you're testing and you're giving feedback to the developers you're working with, is use the site and put yourself in the mindset and in the shoes of your ideal customers, and look for things that are going to be friction points for them. We find in the web development world that visitors are not very patient and they're not very forgiving. If they show up to a website and they have a bad experience, they will be gone immediately. If they show up to a website and have a great user experience, then they'll spend some time on it. And so really think of your website from the perspective of the people you want to use it. And then this last point here gets into this optimization piece. Launching is just the beginning. Oftentimes I work with clients or customers, and they're just so excited to get their website launched because then they're done. They're like, okay, great, this project is behind me. It's taken us 3 months to get here or whatever it is. I'm just happy that my website is launched. Now I can just let it sit there and do its job. Yeah, I mean, the bulk of your work is done. But now, in my opinion, it's actually the start of the project. This is where the fun work comes in, of recording data on who's visiting your site, how are they interacting with their site, are they actually getting to the places you want them to get to, or are they not? And then going back and saying, okay, how can we improve this? How can we make the website even better? My thought here is that launching a website is just the beginning, and most of the good website work you're going to get in is actually going to be after that initial launch on the optimization and iteration phases. So don't miss that step either. Make sure that you're actually testing things on your website. If you're not sure if people are converting or they're not converting as much as you'd like them to, try changing up your CTAs, try adjusting some copy, maybe try a different image, or put a different section, add a section that explains why they should sign up. Start playing with things and then recording data so that you can see, okay, did that help or did that actually make things worse? And then making those iterations and optimizations are going to help your website really, really perform. All right. And again, on tool side of things, we personally love Webflow at Website Squirrel. It's the tool we use. There's a million web development platforms out there. I'm sure you all are familiar with WordPress and Squarespace and all these different platforms. Webflow is our tool of choice just because we have so much control over the technical structure and everything. So we're Webflow nerds. And so I just had to shout out my favorite tool because I literally spend all day, every day in this tool. So anyway, that is that.